Coming up on 5 Minute News. New CDC rules to shorten isolation creates doubt and confusion. US judge rules Proud Boys to face January 6 charges. And Greta Thunberg rejects Joe Biden as a climate change leader. It's Wednesday, December 29. I'm Anthony Davis. US health officials' decision to shorten the recommended COVID-19 isolation and quarantine period from 10 days to 5 is drawing criticism from some medical experts and is creating confusion and fear among many Americans. To the dismay of some authorities, the new guidelines allow people to leave isolation without getting tested to see if they are still infectious. The guidance has raised questions about how it was crafted and why it was changed now, in the middle of another wintertime spike in cases, this one driven largely by the highly contagious Omicron variant. Monday's action by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention cut in half the recommended isolation time for Americans who are infected with coronavirus but have no symptoms. The CDC similarly shortened the amount of time people who have come into close contact with an infected person need to quarantine. The CDC has been under pressure from the public and the private sector, including the airline industry, to shorten the isolation time and reduce the risk of severe staffing shortages amid the Omicron surge. Thousands of flights have been cancelled over the past few days in a mess blamed on Omicron. CDC officials said the guidance is in keeping with growing evidence that people with the virus are most infectious in the first few days. But other experts questioned why the CDC guidelines allow people to leave isolation without testing. Critics say the changes to recommendations seek to protect corporate America rather than public health and could backfire with a delayed effect on the economy as more people get infected with the highly transmissible Omicron variant. A US judge on Tuesday allowed a criminal case relating to the January 6 Capitol attack to move forward, declining to dismiss charges against 4 members of the far-right Proud Boys group. In a written ruling, US District Judge Timothy Kelly rejected arguments by the 4 Proud Boys defendants that obstruction charges should be thrown out. The defendants have been charged with violating a federal law that makes it a felony to obstruct an official government proceeding, among other charges. That obstruction charge has been used by prosecutors in more than 230 of the 700 criminal cases against participants in the assault and could be used to prosecute the former president himself as further evidence of obstruction arises. 4 people died on the day of the riot by supporters of then-President Donald Trump, and 1 Capitol police officer died the next day of injuries sustained while defending Congress. Hundreds of police were injured during the several-hour onslaught, and 4 officers who guarded the Capitol have since taken their own lives. The Proud Boys defendants said the obstruction law is unconstitutional because it is vaguely written and could chill free speech rights. Kelly, who sits in the District of Columbia, rejected that argument. About 40 defendants allegedly affiliated with far-right groups like the Proud Boys, the Oath Keepers, and the 3%ers have been charged with conspiring either to impede Congress or law enforcement officials protecting the Capitol. Meanwhile, the House committee has agreed to defer its attempt to get hundreds of pages of records from the Trump administration, holding off at the request of the Biden White House. The deferral is in response to concerns by the White House that releasing all the Trump administration documents sought by the committee could compromise national security and executive privilege. Climate activist Greta Toonberg has criticized Joe Biden for not leading the fight against climate change. In an interview with the Washington Post, the 18-year-old Swedish environmental activist rejected the idea that the US president is a leader on climate issues. It's strange that people think of Joe Biden as a leader for the climate when you see what his administration is doing, she said. The US is actually expanding fossil fuel infrastructure. In November, Toonberg called the COP26 climate summit in Glasgow a failure, arguing it turned into a PR event in which leaders are not doing anything except actively creating loopholes and shaping frameworks in order to keep profiting from a destructive system. Toonberg said that a COP26 final agreement, which is very much an achievement, will not amount to anything unless it increases ambitions, which leaders then fulfill. In Glasgow, Biden vowed that the US would lead by example in the fight to avoid global heating beyond 1.5 degrees centigrade. He made new promises to cut down on methane, a potent greenhouse gas, and to end deforestation, drawing widespread praise. Nonetheless, when more than 40 countries announced a promise to end coal mining, the US was absent from the list. In a recent report, the UN Environment Programme and other researchers found that global production of oil and gas is on track to rise over the next 20 years, at a rate that will result in double the fossil fuel production in 2030, consistent with a 1.5 degrees centigrade rise. The report found that the US projects increases in oil and gas production by 17% and 12% respectively by 2030. You can subscribe to 5-Minute News on YouTube with your preferred podcast app. Ask your smart speaker or enable 5-Minute News as your Amazon Alexa flash briefing skill. Subscribe, rate and review online at 5minute.news. 5-Minute News is an Evergreen podcast covering politics, inequality, health and climate, delivering independent, unbiased and essential world news daily.